so you listened to our first two segments, and we were talking about maybe the connect or the disconnect between play caller and quarterback. Well, what's your thoughts on what we were talking about?
Yeah, when I happened to have done the post game after that Minnesota game with Olin and Manley, and all three of us, I think the theme of that post game was being very critical of the play caller, of Luke Getsy, and how could you not be, considering the abnormal amount of screenplays that were called. But what I don't understand about all of this is when Luke Getsy attempts to be honest and transparent, and I thought he comported himself pretty well in the way he talked about it. Like, he didn't come in ripping Fields. I mean, he mentioned several times along the way.
Passively, though. He did it passively. It's about what he's not saying. It's very passive voice about what is not happening.
Yeah, but I think that's okay, Dan. Like, do we want somebody? You know what I hate, and I imagine you guys hate this too, is when a coach, player, general manager, anybody gets up there and just says, it's on me, it's my fault. No, it's my fault. Because you know how disingenuous they're being. And we have been dying to, and maybe this is personal for me in some way as a reporter, we have been dying for real information about what's going on with Justin Fields. What is happening? I don't want to just hear, well, it's all of us, it's the office, because that's what Luke Getsy has said so many times along the way. He said, well, it's everybody. It's not just, how many times? Go back. How many times did he say it's not just Justin Fields? So now when there are...
But he never says it's me. He might say that it's not just Justin Fields, but that usually is we didn't block it correctly or guys didn't run the wrong routes. It's never, you know what? I didn't put him in a great situation this week, and I could have done a better job. And if you go back through the transcript of what he told you guys yesterday, you won't find that. That's what I'm saying, is that it doesn't have to be one end of the spectrum where you globalize it and you act like no one's at fault because everyone's at fault, versus running a dump truck over the players. There's middle ground there, and that middle ground is taking accountability as you as the designer of the offense and the play caller. And there's middle ground where he can talk about the things and give you guys the information about the RPOs and the choices that were made. Well, why were the RPOs the calls? Why were you having Darnell Mooney as a lead blocker on plays where he was getting blown up? Those are all on Luke Getsy. Those are not on the quarterback.
Well, okay, maybe he should have been a little bit more accountable in that regard. But I would also challenge you to go back in the transcript and check out the times where he sort of soft pedaled it and said, look, he was mostly great, a couple of decisions here and there. And I know that there was a buildup as this went on. Also, and Luke Getsy has been hearing this since the Minnesota game. He's been hearing everybody slam him. And look, he's made mistakes, and I don't want to look at it like I'm like in the Luke Getsy fan club, because I think it's a debate whether or not he should come back. But the idea that Luke Getsy has been on this island hearing about himself since the Minnesota game, that's a long time ago, and then he comes on and he tries to give some perspective on what actually happened as opposed to generalizing, I think is really smart. And also, I would ask the question of, Dan, you were asking a good question. What has Luke Getsy accomplished? Quite frankly, what has the quarterback accomplished? And I understand there could be a correlation, but this is not the first coordinator. And I just like what has Fields done? And I think that sometimes we have to look at both parts of this, and finally we have somebody being somewhat honest about him. And I want to make this clear, because I had people coming at me yesterday, why do you hate Justin Fields? That is far from the truth. And I've given Justin Fields the benefit of the doubt as long as I possibly could. But since training camp, we've been seeing some of the flaws with Justin Fields, and he's had some terrific games, and I hope he's the Bears quarterback. But it's amazing the lack of culpability that we are seeing towards Justin Fields and his decision-making, when we all know
I don't agree with that at all, Grote. He has to wear it every week. You know, and I know that fans are, what he gets wrong is pretty evident. It's pretty evident. Like, as you're watching the game, you can see some of the things that he gets wrong. I think that it takes a little bit more of a coach to be able to explain, you know what, Brian Flores had me. he got me. And you can look at the way from the first game, how that game was called, to the way the second game was called versus Minnesota, and see an offensive coordinator who was spooked. Now, is he spooked partially because of what his quarterback can and can't do? That's fair. I think that's a fair assessment of things. He also does, as the game goes on, and you can see it in the way that the game is called, he turtles. His first scripted 15 plays are pretty dynamic.
Always.
And then what happens? As the game goes on and as he gets challenged by the other coach, he turtles. And that's why you see some of these side-to-side calls instead of vertical calls that you're seeing from the Bears.
Which it would bother me when he mentioned specifically the 4th and 10 delay play to Cole Kmet. Gained 26 yards. It was perfectly executed. And he even gave Justin Fields credit. That was the last time they called it. They got him in it. They got him in a look. They called it, and they got it. And this idea of, it's one thing to say, run it until they stop it. He's almost back. It's like stopping. He's running what they're stopping, not what they're not stopping. We see it. I think there's a stubbornness there, and like you say, you call it turtling. I just think there's a fear where usually offensive coordinators are risky to a fault. Usually, even John Shoup used to say, we have a play where we think we can score from anywhere on the field. And I remember asking him, why don't you run it then?
Yeah, there's a little bit to the side of what we're talking about. But one of the other things, too, is, and I understand it, in this town, the offensive coordinator, because the Bears offense has stunk for so long, they do not get the benefit of the doubt. Bill Lazor and Matt Nagy and John DeFilippo were all ripped. I remember when Mitch Trubisky, towards the end of his tenure, Mitch Trubisky was throwing his arms up and asking, we would ask, hey, why aren't they letting you run the ball more or be you more? And he kind of threw his arms up and said, I don't know. I don't know what's going on. Look at this guy. And now look at Mitch Trubisky. Like everybody was worried that he was going to be great down the line. But back to your point, I just wonder how much of it is the Justin Fields decision making. And you said why not go back to those particular plays? What has to be taken into account, and what never gets taken into account, is that maybe the offensive coordinator knows that those are things that are not going to, that Justin Fields, as the game goes on, is not going to be able to connect on. We've seen him make a lot of mistakes as games have gone on, especially in the fourth quarter of games. So
but when we saw a play succeed, why would you think that Justin Fields couldn't make it succeed again?
I mean, Dan
gave a specific example, Grote, on a play that was called and was successful on a big 4th down. Why wouldn't you go to it or something similar again?
Probably because Luke Getsy has seen it not work again as the game has gone on, or there have been too many times where they've been burned, or Justin Fields in tight spots has made mistakes. Again, Luke Getsy has been imperfect. I don't know if he's the offensive coordinator going forward. I just think it's crazy that there's all this talk coming out about Luke Getsy when he tried to be honest about the quarterback, and now he's probably going to feel burned and maybe not be as honest as he has been. And at some point in time, he's got to defend himself too.
Yeah, I don't think it's zero sum. I think the quarterback is imperfect. I think you have an offensive coordinator who's probably a level over promoted at this point. I also think it's likely they're both not here next year.
I think that's very possible.
Be here. But
what's that, Lawrence?
I think it's more possible that one of them will be here, but we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, the Justin Fields question is very interesting in terms of whether or not he's going to be back. It's really difficult to call because it seems like there's plenty of support for him, but yeah, look, if this relationship with Luke Getsy and Justin Fields is not working, then he's got to go. One other thing, too, is that, Justin Fields at one point in time did speak out about the specifics of the coaching and how he wanted to open things up and play more freely. He was widely applauded the first time Justin Fields was honest about it. Then he had to call another press conference to basically say he wasn't calling anybody out. So he was transparent. Everybody applauded him. When Getsy was transparent, he was just getting mashed.